Okay, yeah, here we go. So yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's James, and I'm from the MailStore channel team. I hope you're all doing really well. I'm absolutely blown away with the numbers we've got on this session. It's great to see so many faces from all around the world, and I think this is definitely the largest webinar I've presented. We had over 100 people register for it, so that is just absolutely fantastic. Welcome along if it's the first time you've done a live session with us, and likewise if you're a regular attender. I feel particularly honoured, I have to say, because if your mailboxes are anything like mine, I am completely flooded at the moment with invites for webinars and virtual events and things. So I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to learn a bit more about MailStore in particular, and hopefully we'll make the most of this time for you. As I mentioned, I've got Ronny here, also my friend in the technical team. He'll be presenting the technical content. And we're also doing this in collaboration with our distribution partners. I'm not going to name them all because I'll leave somebody out and get in trouble. But a special shout to Zen Software, who've actually helped with producing this as well. Yeah, so we've got a full channel representation here today. In terms of just a quick bit of housekeeping, I'm going to aim for 30 minutes, and it's quite a task. But we're going to have a 30-minute session for the content, and then you're welcome to spend as much time as you like afterwards asking questions. We can go back over stuff, but yeah, we're going to try and wrap it up in that time. I'm muting all the microphones. If you could also just keep an eye on yours, I think that should do it. But I think you do have the ability to unmute, so keep an eye on it. Make sure there's no dogs barking in the background or whatever whatever going on. Heavy breathing is the typical one, isn't it? So keep an eye on that. And just a note about Teams, if you can put in your name at your company name, that's useful for us just to be able to reference it quickly. So if you could call yourself by that, great. But obviously bear in mind that is visible to others. So if you use that, people will know you're on the session, if that's okay. And this is a bit of a kind of a first run for Teams, so hopefully we'll do okay. I'm going to do a very quick introduction, and then we'll jump into a live demo, and then we'll do the Q&A at the end. So right now, while we're in the middle of a global pandemic, why exactly would your customers be thinking about email archiving of all things? And in actual fact, they probably weren't to begin with. I imagine the first thing they'll be thinking about is, okay, how do I get remote working? How do I do that securely? What are these new tools I've got in front of me? And generally just how do I keep my business afloat? And obviously there's some real priorities there to look after. But as the dust settles a bit, there's some areas where email archiving can really help. And certainly when there's a lot of staff turnover happening, I mean, unfortunately, it's just the reality of the situation. If you've got people being furloughed temporarily or being dismissed permanently, they have in their mailboxes conversations with customers, suppliers, partners, internally, you name it, that, a business owner or other members of the team might need access to. So it's really important that you've got a way of getting access to that quickly. And that's something that MailStore can help with. The other thing is, sometimes these people aren't going to be all that happy about having to leave. And if they're disgruntled, then it's quite possible they can just delete their messages permanently from Office 365. As you probably know, there is no permanent record of email in 365. It's up to you to make a record of it. So they can delete their tracks permanently, and there's nothing you can do about that. Vital information can go missing. So it's really important to have a copy. The other thing is, if you've got people that have moved from maybe desktop environments to a laptop, and they will have had, it's quite common, they've got these Outlook archives, so PST archives. If they were on the desktop machine, it's quite possible that now they're not available on the laptop anymore. So having a central place that you go for all your mail, like an archive, is ideal because you've got access to that then from any device and from anywhere. The other element to this is, with a distributed workforce, people working from home, sometimes we don't always want to have to do a video call. As much fun as this is, we don't always want to have a video call for every check-in, every query. It can be useful to be able to search across the entire team and their mailboxes to find out what was the last conversation that they had with a particular customer or supplier. And with archiving, it's something that's often overlooked. You can perform a search from Outlook, and provided you set up the permissions, you can see across the entire, the entire workforce if you wish as a business owner. So it's really a time-saving productivity tool. And last but not least is independence. So in terms of Office 365, your eggs are all in one basket there, essentially. So having an independent record that's safe from any of the things that can happen to a 365 tenant, whether it's a service outage and you need access, ransomware attacks, issues with administrator policies being applied incorrectly, anything that can happen to the 365 tenant, it's good to have a record of your company email just in case. And that can be useful when you're also, if you need to move away from 365, maybe that's not going to be the case at the moment, I don't know. But also if you want to move to 365 from another platform, this independence of having a record that you can just detach from, say, Exchange. So you can put in all your Exchange mail and then have it there available and accessible for when you move to your 365 platform. It's a really useful independent place to have your mail when you're moving between platforms. I could go on about this for quite a while, and I probably will do in another webinar, but just so you know, we've got a really good white paper and cheat sheet on this. We paid this Osterman research group to look into in detail what archiving features are available in Office 365 and how they compare, and then why you'd want to use a third-party solution. So it's really nice in-depth stuff. It talks about the difference between archiving and backup, because a lot of people think, oh, I'll just back up, that's fine, that'll cover it. In actual fact, that does leave gaps where things could potentially be deleted that archiving would cover. It talks about the self-service element. So a lot of solutions, yes, they'll take a copy of the mail, but they don't make it possible for a user just to get access to it right from within Outlook. And that's quite a big differentiator. So anyway, that goes into it in lots of detail. Download a copy. We've got a reseller handout as well, which we can provide to you. When you registered, if you said it's okay for us to follow up with you, we'll send it to you automatically. If you would like all the links I talk about today and you didn't say it's okay, just send us an email to partners@mailstore.com and just say follow up, please, and we'll send you all the links. My colleague in the marketing team has literally today just launched a new video on our YouTube channel as well, which encapsulates all the points in this white paper really nicely. It's a little animated 1-minute explainer, so I'll send you a link to that also. So just to give you an overview, just to try and get this kind of picture clear, when you set up MailStore, there's some very basic steps you go through, and this is the way to think about it. The first thing we do is we synchronize users. So we don't want to be adding everyone into MailStore manually. So we synchronize them with Active Directory, if it's an Exchange user, local Active Directory normally, or if it's Office 365, the Azure AD. Then we import the historic mail, which is basically, this is the longest part of the setup really. It's importing the messages from the mailboxes, all the historic stuff, and then pulling in, say, your PST files as well that will be dotted around the network. That's got you all of your historic email. And then we set up what's called journaling. So for those of you not familiar, journaling is basically another mailbox. And the benefit of it is, if we think in Exchange terms, you're basically, it puts a copy of everything that comes and goes from the server into a separate mailbox. But the really important bit is it never passes the user. So it doesn't matter what the user does, there's a copy going into this mailbox all the time. And this is where the gateway will come in a minute. So in Exchange, you would normally just set up a mailbox. And then once you've got all of your current email being archived, so everything that's coming in, you've got all your old stuff, you've got all the new stuff in there, you're then free to set a mailbox retention level. So you can say, actually, I only want a year's worth of email in my mailbox now because I've got it all accessible via the Outlook add-in, which I'll show you in a second. So it's accessible to users easily. They can search it easily. I don't necessarily need a massive mailbox, which could be slow on a remote connection. So this diagram is kind of fundamental to getting across what we're trying to do today, and hopefully I can sort of explain it. This is showing you email coming in to Microsoft 365, and then 365 does have this journaling option like in Exchange, but the major obstacle we're trying to overcome here, or we do overcome, is Microsoft 365 will not journal to itself. So you can't set up a mailbox on the platform and journal back to it. And that's the limitation that's really quite frustrating. So with the gateway, we're solving this issue, because rather than having to send emails, say, to another mailbox somewhere else on a third-party platform, or another SMTP server somewhere else so that MailStore can collect it, with the gateway, we can send all of this journaled email direct to the gateway. The gateway is picking it up on a regular basis, and then MailStore is collecting that. So by doing that, it goes to 365, to the gateway, to MailStore, and there's never a point at which a user can delete any messages. And importantly, that's essential for compliance, obviously. You might have seen there's loads of, I've seen the Information Commissioner's Office circulating notifications about GDPR again, which is interesting, because obviously it's a bit different now. We're all working from home. They want us to be reminded that it still applies, I guess. But yeah, if compliance is a concern, and I think this is just good practice anyway, if you want to know you've got a copy of everything, then it's essential that you're journaling, really. So I hope that makes some sense. What you're seeing here is that's the Outlook interface. I've put a square around the Outlook add-in. So you would search for your mail there, and that's then querying MailStore, pulling your archived email in whenever you need it, and obviously your live mailbox view to 365 is always there as well. So for the user, they've just got everything they need right there at their fingertips. That's all that matters. But this is hopefully giving you some idea of the back end. So I hope that's been of some use. If we need to revisit this diagram and go over it again, by all means, we can afterwards. But for now, I'm just going to hand over to Ronny, and he's going to dive into just looking at what's involved in the setup steps of the gateway itself. So Ronny, if you're available.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Yeah, good stuff.
Wonderful, great. So hopefully you can see me right now. All right.
Yeah, gotcha.
So
good.
Yeah, just yeah. Sorry, first of all, for the camera angle. I don't know why they placed the camera there, but I have to deal with it right now. So yeah. The first step would, of course, be to set up the MailStore server and install it in a proper way, just as we do it normally. Then the most important thing after installing MailStore server is always to get the users or the user objects into MailStore server, into the MailStore server list, to so that MailStore is aware of who's in the MailStore server and which email addresses are in it and how they authenticate. And in case of the Azure AD and Office 365, we have to create an impersonation user within the Office 365 environment using the PowerShell of Office 365. We have to do a few steps from a how-to to give a role to the user so that he's able, or that he got the ability to have reading rights on the user list and can synchronize it with MailStore server. And once this is done on the side of the Office 365, we have to enter those details in our running and already installed MailStore server installation, and fill those fields there and synchronize the users with MailStore, which is on the next slide. You could just easily turn the next slide. Yeah, there we go. So as you see, we are logged in with the administrator and have navigated to the administrative tools, users and archives, and have found directory services. There in the first box, we have chosen Office 365. Normally, it is set to Active Directory locally, but in this case, we're using the Azure AD and Office 365. So we have set up a service principal or impersonation user in our tenant. I've named it that way, entered the password and entered my domain, and have therefore synchronized my users, and they are now in the user list. So just a normal user synchronization with MailStore server. And the next step would now be to set up the MailStore gateway. And therefore, I would like to share my screen to my test environment. Just bear with me a second. There we go. So is it okay, James? Can you?
Yeah, that's looking good. Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. Yeah, I have already downloaded the MailStore Gateway and installed it, so it's no big deal, just a normal software installation for 1 minute. And there are some prerequisites that we need to do when using the gateway in combination with Office 365. So there has to be done something on the infrastructure side. So first of all, we need a public IP address that is related to especially this machine where the MailStore Gateway is running on. So Microsoft from the external side is able to route to it again and again every day and to journal the emails to especially this machine, because that's what we want, of course. Therefore, when we have a public IP address for this machine, we need to also set up a DNS record for this machine. So in my case, it's win10.example.bsp in the DNS zone example.bsp. So this public IP address is now routed to this machine and resolvable for this machine name. And it is also mandatory to set up MX records on the on your site. So it is possible for Microsoft to know that there are mailboxes behind it, and it makes it easier to route those journal mails into the gateway mailbox that we will now set up. So therefore, I have defined this name for my email domain. The certificate is a self-signed one, which you can also choose. And we have different log levels right here. So we can, the standard is information, which just gives us normal information about the steps that are going on with the gateway. So we can also turn it on warning or error if something is appearing, but the standard is information. I will just have to click apply and start up the gateway service in the background. There are also some standard ports in the firewall that needs to be open for it. So obviously the SMTP and POP3 port, to make it possible to work correctly for the gateway. And once these prerequisites are done, it should work perfectly with the gateway and in combination with MailStore server. And the next step would be to log in to the MailStore Gateway. So I think, or I hope, just here it is understandable what needs to be done for the prerequisite that it can work basically before we go into the next steps. And those would look like the following. So we are logging into the gateway in the management, in the web browser. So it is HTTPS. Then the name of the machine where the gateway is running on. In my case, this is localhost. Otherwise, it would be the name of the IP address. And our standard port for accessing the gateway is 8450. And then we're coming to this point in. Unfortunately, it's German, but it says that there might be a risk. So please make sure to always replace it with a valid SSL certificate or with a valid certificate from a CA, so that the users are not running into errors or warnings. I will accept it and accept the risiko for now. I will quickly change it to English, and now we're coming to the first sign-in. The first sign-in is always with the admin user and the password called admin. This is just for the initial one. So if we click on sign in, there will be a notice that will say, okay, this was the initial password, but it will now be reset, and it will be reset to this complicate one. So as it is said right here, make sure that it is in a safe place and that it is stored correctly, so that you can always find it to log on to the MailStore Gateway. There is a possibility to reset it, but then the mailboxes are lost or can't be accessed again. So just make sure to store it in a good way, maybe in a backup also. For now, I'm just doing a text document to hold it for that. So I'll just give it the name for the admin, and this is the password for logging in. Save this quickly. So we have that. And as you see, we're now logged into the gateway. So we're seeing with which user we are logged into. We would change, or we could change the language right here, for example. But there is also the possibility to create the mailbox, which we want to use as the journal mailbox for Office 365. So we will create it, given a name, for example, Office 365 journaling or Microsoft 365 journaling. Click on OK. And there will be another notice that we now have created this mailbox successfully with the mailbox ID, which is this one here. This will be important later on. So I will note this down as well. And we, again, getting a password, which is quite complex. So always make sure to keep the passwords for the gateway in a safe place to be on the safe side. Otherwise, if this password got lost, you can, of course, create a new mailbox or create a new password for this mailbox, but you can't access the remaining emails in the mailbox once this initial password is lost. So you will also read a text for this right here, and you have to tick this box to say that you have read and understood it, and we can click on OK, and this mailbox has now been created. It is active in a live state, and we see the mailbox ID and the name. There can also be set up different gateway mailboxes if you like, maybe also another one for another tenant. So in the case of a MailStore service provider. And at the bottom of the page, we are seeing general information about this mailbox. So for example, our mailbox ID that we will need for the archiving. And more important is this SMTP address, which is needed for Office 365 as the target mailbox where Microsoft can send these journal reports and journal mails to. So as we have made sure that there is an IP address related to my machine and it is accessible from the external side, so of course from Microsoft side, this would be the address for Office 365 to send the journals to. And I will now copy it because we will need this for setting up the journal rule within the Office 365 tenant. Therefore, I have already logged into the to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and I have navigated to the Exchange Administrative Center. And I will now create the journal rule. Was this also okay for the majority, or was it clear? Was it understandable? So maybe there are already some things you would like to hear.
Yeah, it's worth checking in, isn't it? Is everyone following it okay? Are there any questions at this stage? I can see some questions coming in. I'll get to some of those at the end. I see one from you, Luke. I'll get to
maybe you can pick out some of them. And we can get to this later on.
Yeah.
So for now, we have set up the prerequisites. We have installed the gateway and set up a mailbox within the gateway, as it just behaves as a normal SMTP endpoint and just simple mail server. And we have created this mailbox, which we will now use as the journal mailbox for Office 365. And as I said, I'm in the Exchange Admin Center and now would like to create a journal rule for all my emails of the Office 365 being journaled to this one. So I move over to Compliance Management and find journal rules at the very right here. Please don't wonder, this is our test environment, so there are a couple journal rules, as you can see, but we will create a new one, of course. So always make sure that this undeliverable journal reports address is an extra address for this, because this email address is not being affected of the journal one. So make sure that this is an extra mailbox or an extra address where all the undeliverables can go to. Otherwise, this email address won't be taken within the journals. So we will now create a new journal rule by ticking this cross right here. And now it says send journal reports to. So for the normal Exchange, we would now enter the address of the journal mailbox or the third-party mailbox, but we have set up a gateway mailbox. And now this SMTP address is important. So we have to copy it, go back to the journal one, and find this window and insert it right here so that this SMTP address is mentioned here and Office 365 does know where to route those Office 365 mails. I'll just give it a quick name. And for the following fields, we have to select apply to all messages. So if the message is sent to or received from, and of course for the following messages, for all messages, as I want to archive every message that goes in or goes out for my Office 365 tenant. And we just have to save it, want to apply it for the future. And this is basically how this journal rule is set up. So just a few points here. We're just waiting for it to finish. There we go. We would now have to, or it is active, and MailStore is now for this tenant, or Office 365 is now for this tenant, keeping all the in and outgoing mails journaling to this mailbox that you can find on the right side. So it's MBX and my SMTP address. And now we have did this step for creating this journal mailbox, and we will now come to the MailStore server, where we can finally archive this journal mailbox. So these are the steps so far. I will go back to the desktop. This will be important in a couple of seconds. So let me just get in here. So I'm logged into MailStore server. Choose archive email. Remember, we have already synchronized the user objects, and now we have to set up an archiving profile for it. So we will choose email servers, as we want to archive from an email server basically. And normally for on-prem Exchange we choose this, but now to archive from a gateway mailbox, of course we choose this one, as the name is saying, MailStore Gateway Mailbox. Clicking on that. And make sure that this one here is ticked. I mean, it's ticked by default, but it's also the correct one, Office 365. And we would also have the possibility to set this up for Google G Suite, another email server, or an email client. But for this example today, we will choose this one right here. And now we have to enter a host for archiving from this journal mailbox. So the host is basically the machine name where this MailStore gateway is installed on. In my case, it is installed on the same machine, so it stays with localhost, of course with an L. And for the mailbox ID, now we have to have a look into the gateway again, as it is displayed there. So the normal gateway view. And here we can also find the mailbox ID, which we have to copy right now. So do not copy the SMTP address, just the mailbox ID. And we will have to place it in the exact field right here. And of course, the password that has been generated for this mailbox, which I have saved in a document. I will also copy this and put it into this password field, and we could now test the connection to this gateway, and it could successfully be established. So the connection is now fine. Messages with unknown email addresses, I will put them into a catch-all folder with unknown email addresses, just for this case. And of course, as for the other journaling method, you should tick this box here that the mails will be deleted once MailStore server has successfully archived them from the gateway mailbox, as it just is holding all the copies, and once they have been successfully archived, they would just frequent the storage. So just make sure to tick this box so they will get deleted. And we could synchronize with the directory service again for keeping the user list if you like. And after the click on next, we could define a timeout, which is not that important right now. And then you could define a name for this archiving profile to archive from a gateway mailbox. And after clicking on finish, it will connect to it, run through it, and it would archive something if there would be an email within the journal mailbox right now. And so now, in the conclusion, we have set up the users, set up the MailStore gateway, installed it quickly, logged onto it using the browser, and created a journal mailbox within it. Then we have logged into the administrative center of Office 365, where we created this journal rule to tell Microsoft to journal to this gateway mailbox. We have created an archiving profile within MailStore server to connect to this journal mailbox in the gateway to archive from it. And now, the emails are archived, and we could, for example, go into my Outlook of one of my example users named Robert Kane, and we have them within the archive, and I could now use the MailStore Outlook add-in to run a test search, and it would, of course, show some emails. So we are able to read the archived emails from the gateway right inside of the Outlook environment, and basically these are the steps how this setup is working. And I hope I could give you a rough summary of what this is about. And I would hand it over to you again, James, if that is okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just watching the chat. There's some really interesting questions coming in, actually, and quite a few of them, as I expected. Okay. That was kind of the quick run through. We wanted to do an intro and then just show you the steps, but I imagine we probably need to go back and have a chat about some of the points. So if there's anything you'd like to discuss, feel free to let me know now. I see Neil's doing a great job of answering some questions in the chat.
Yeah, also thank you for that, Neil.
Yeah. Luke was talking about running through dynamic groups with MS Azure. I think that might be one for another session, possibly, unless you wanted to talk about that at some point, Luke. I think you guys probably do something slightly more advanced. It sounds like a good way of doing it, but it's not one that certainly I'm familiar with, unless the other guys. Neil, are you able to chip in? Are you on the... Is your microphone unmuted? I'll come back anyway. Are you, unless Ronny, I don't know if you can help with that one at all. It's not something I'm familiar with, so.
Could you repeat the question again? Then I can decide if I have an answer or not.
Yeah, no worries. So Luke was just asking, are you going to run through dynamic groups within MS Azure? We use Azure AD dynamic groups for our MailStore archiving with Office 365. We do it for clients as it allows for much more granular archiving of users.
Mm-hmm. So I think you're speaking of the user synchronization then with this dynamic groups. In this case, of course, it's as you already said, it's possible to set those user groups up for specific customers, or also for specific groups, and have them synchronized with MailStore to do the archiving there. If it is meant for the groups in case of the enterprise journaling, so of course, you can also specify some groups for putting users into it from the Azure AD or from Office 365 that should just be included for this Office 365 journaling. But this is the enterprise version, and this is a more specific way to wrap some specific users into a journaling rule. This might be the answers if I understood it correctly. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to give a better answer by an email or at the request later on.
Yeah, nice one. Excellent. Cheers for that, Ronny. Luke also mentioned about Outlook PST archives and not being a fan of them. So that's we don't like our Outlook PSTs in general are a complete nightmare, because not only for just the clunky nature of trying to get access to them and them not being backed up, but also the fact that for compliance, they're a bit of a nightmare to have Outlook archives dotted around. So not a big fan. Chris mentioned about the Osterman report and how neutral it is. Yes, it's a sponsored white paper, so you've always got to bear that in mind. I think it's kind of general practice that that's done in the industry, that you sponsor someone to look into it. Osterman have been around for 20 odd years or so, and they trust me, when we went through the process, they were very much, we will only say what is fact. So we've asked them to look into 365, all the options available, because they could do a better job than we could, honestly. So they're reporting on that. If you read it, you'll see that the wording is very much kind of, this is what's available, and they're not bashing Microsoft in any way. It's just a good factual account. Hi, Mandeep. Good to see you on the session. I see you've already had your question answered. Bruce had a really good suggestion, but Neil's answered that one as well. And I see, Chris had another great question about high availability, so you guys can see the answer to that. Right. Hiram,
James.
hi there. Oh, sorry, go on, Neil.
Hi there, hi guys. I'll just appear here somewhere.
Yeah, by all means.
I just thought if it might be worth if I just go back over. And I think it was Hiram mentioned the same question. Was it? Who was it earlier? Chris. They were just talking about monitoring the gateway mailbox and if it's possible to know how many messages potentially are in that mailbox. Assuming that MailStore wasn't picking them up for some reason, could there be an option in the gateway interface to show sort of count of number of messages? I know that's not currently there, but one of the things I've done in the past with a customer who was asking the same thing was, Ronnie, I don't know if you can show the actual folder where the messages are kept, but fundamentally each message in the mailbox is a separate file. It's an encrypted file, so you can't see the contents, but you can just monitor the folder contents for those messages using any sort of monitoring software or a PowerShell script. To give you an idea of whether the gateway is filling up, because obviously that's a concern if if messages are going into the gateway but aren't being cleared down, you want to sort of monitor the size of that folder. So, so if Ronnie, I think if you just go into that gateway folder, is it empty at the moment, I guess? But
yeah, of course. So there would normally be a so if there would be some emails in there, as you already correctly said, per email in it, there will also be a file within this file system, and there will also be a folder created with the name of this MBX. So with the mailbox ID, there will be a folder created for that, and the files for each email will be in there. And that's also a way how you can check how many emails are in there, or if there are some mails in there. Correct.
Exactly, and that was quite useful because you could have an alarm then to say if that reaches more than several hundred, let's say, then you know that something's not clearing that mailbox down. But it's worth pointing out that those messages are fully encrypted, so it's not another way of seeing that data. You can only know that there are so many messages. So I just thought I'd just point that one out.
Yep. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, it's a really good point. That we need to. I'll put that one on the wish list as well. I'll send it across to the development guys so they can have a look at it and see if there's some way of getting that information on the dashboard. Hopefully.
Yeah. Hi, James. Hi, everyone. Christina speaking from MailStore.
Hey.
I think it is on the wish list already. So without sharing too much, but I think this will be a feature which might be available, hopefully in the near future.
Amazing. Excellent. Thank you for that. That's good. There you go, Bruce. You don't get much of a quicker response than that, do you really? It's already there. Okay. Any other questions we wanted to cover? I think Hiram was also asking about transport rules there. It's quite difficult to follow this chat, but
shall I step in here again, James, just to sort of summarize
feel free.
What I've mentioned here. I think the questions are all to a similar point. It's talking about sort of high availability and the rules within Exchange for journaling. The concern is always what happens if the MailStore gateway isn't available for some reason. Office 365 would try to journal that message, try to deliver it to the gateway address and fail. Now, it's my understanding that in that scenario, Office 365, you give it an address for those failed messages to go to resolve. So if it can't send it, it doesn't just keep trying. It will then bounce that message into a separate mailbox in Office 365. And then you can also, if needed, configure a second archiving rule in MailStore to collect those messages. Now, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ronnie, that you wouldn't. They would just be kind of collected and potentially just put into a separate location in MailStore because they're a failed bounce. They're not the original journal message. They're almost like a bounce of that original message. So the message would still be archived, but you don't lose that message if the gateway was down. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So yes, you can have high availability to have potentially multiple MX records that for your gateway domain, so that if one gateway is down, it could resolve to a second one, and there's nothing stopping you having two gateways set up. But I think the issue with that was that you couldn't define the mbox address, so they can't be the same. Is that also correct at the moment? I just wanted to be clear on that before I recommended that.
Yeah, that's also correct. So it should be that one Office 365 mailbox for the one tenant, and so a mix up of the MX records would leads then to an error, I think, just as you explained.
Yeah, so I know. Just to summarize, I just wanted to let people know that this is things that we have been discussing and looking for a slightly more high availability option there. But at the moment, the best bet I've found is to allow it to bounce back and collect that mail, so you don't miss that message.
Correct.
I just noticed actually Mark mentioned a really good point as well. With the gateway, of course, one of the benefits is that if you're sending mail, if you're journaling mail direct from 365 to the gateway, there's no chance of any spam filter getting in the way or anything. So if you're currently using a solution where you're journaling to, a third-party mailbox, it's quite possible that spam filter might cut some mail out, and you couldn't really consider it a complete record or to be totally compliant. So you get a nice pure feed straight into the gateway, which is really important. Paul Rumsey, nice to see you. Yes, he mentioned about the maximum limits on mailboxes. I mean, the maximum limit is 500 for MailStore server currently. That may change in the future, is all I can say on that one without getting in trouble. But I guess would we say that's same for the gateway then, or would you just have a single? I guess in most cases you just have a single mailbox, actually, wouldn't you? Maybe you can answer that one better than I can.
If we're talking about normal mailbox within MailStore server, then it's the soft limitation is 500. So for users or mailboxes, and if it is possible to do a 501 or 502 mailboxes, but if you would like to do it in a bigger environment with more than 500 users, just better get in touch with us separately so we can define the technical data for the specific scenario of the customer and decide what's the best way to implement MailStore server within this environment of the customer.
That's right, but in the scenario of a gateway, you generally just create the single mailbox, right? So you could have 500 users on MailStore server, for example, but you would just create the one journaling.
Okay, of course.
Yeah. Sorry, it's the way I put the question. Don't worry.
So this is correct. So you will set up this one mailbox, and it will be effective for 500 users, and we'll keep all the mails in there journaled, and hopefully removed if the box is ticked within the archiving profile.
And do we have any concept, Paul? I'm not sure if that's quite what you're asking, but do we have any concept of how many mailboxes you could put in the gateway, as in individual?
Yeah, so basically it's also possible to create more mailboxes. I think there is not really a hard-coded limit for creating just 10 or 20 mailboxes. So I think you can create as much as you like. I have to get this information from the engineering.
Yeah,
but,
I'm not sure.
So you can definitely have a separate one. So one for the Office 365 journaling, another one maybe for a G Suite customer or for a G Suite tenant that you would like to archive. And you can do a combination of it, and there is not a limit of 5 or something. So
I guess as well in the scenario, if you're doing there's also the service provider edition of MailStore. So if you're hosting it with multiple clients, that's when you'd probably create a mailbox per company that you're servicing, basically. So in that instance, you may well have whatever. It could be up to 50 or so.
That's quite comfortable for a service provider to just have one gateway machine or just one gateway installed, and can set up mailbox for every customer or for every instance, and just take care about that then. For having a gateway installed for each customer on a machine or something like that. So that's quite easy then.
Yeah, that works really nicely, doesn't it? Because for a service provider previously, it would have been less than ideal to have to send a journal to every single to multiple different mailboxes outside of their environment and so on. So
I can see either way. It's a bigger administrative. No worries. It's a more administrative exercise for the service provider, so that makes it easy to keep in hand on all of the Office 365 mailboxes or the gateway mailboxes and have them on one machine.
Yeah, so you just create a unique mailbox for each customer, wouldn't you? That works pretty well. I can see an interesting conversation going on here, and it's one I've overheard before. Mandeep at Network Computing, hi there. He was talking about using the BCC option here to basically achieve something similar. Neil, do you want to just jump in here? Because I know this is something we've talked about in the past.
Am I back? Hello there, guys. Yeah, we went down this path early on to try and find a solution for journaling. The issue we came across is that emails that are only sent to BCC addresses, so where they don't have a valid to address header or from header for the local Office 365 domain, and only those emails, but those, when they get pushed into another mailbox by the Outlook rule, there's no header information on those messages when MailStore collects them, so they can't be then routed into users' archives. So it's only those particular messages it affects, but those would end up in a catch-all location in the MailStore archive. I know Mandeep sort of pointed out that, well, emails are getting routed fine. I think those will only be messages that are either to or from local addresses. So best to double check, unless something's changed here, that it was always the case that if a message doesn't have a valid to or from header, then it couldn't be routed, because BCC by definition won't have a header that matches the domain.
Yeah, excellent. I think that's a good explanation. I'm just at this point, as we're just kind of getting into various different nitty-gritty elements of this, which is all really useful. Just to let you know, if you just wanted to absorb that initial bit of content and then you'd like a follow-up afterwards, if you said you'd like a follow-up on the original registration, then we'll send you the links, and if to everything we've talked about. And if you've got any questions, of course, you are always welcome to address them to your distributors or to us, partners at mailstore.com. So we're quite happy just to hang around and talk like this for as long as you like, really. But just to let you know, you don't feel obliged to stay if you don't want to get into the detailed stuff. So anyway, sorry, just thought I'd get that in there. Back to the questions. So I see Luke's also mentioning about the BCC not being suitable for legal e-discovery due to missing metadata and modified message contents. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll let a few more questions come in. I'll tell you what I will do. I'll just flash up my my next steps slide. So if you have capacity, there's a couple of things you might be interested in. We run a MailStore certification, so we'll probably do a live training boot camp of this as well. Actually, we tried it once before, Ronny, didn't we? And I tried to get you to cram in 2 hours of content into an hour, and that didn't really work. But I think this time around we've got it sussed, so we're going to run that again. Basically, we offer a MailStore certification. It's a technical course. You can just do it online. You can just use the study guide which we provide for you, and the online help. It's an open book thing. You do an online test, and there's various benefits to do with your partner levels, which will vary depending on the distributor you work with. But really good. If you've got capacity in the team right now and you want to improve your technical knowledge, that's great. You get a nice logo for your site, and it gives you a bit of extra kudos. We also offer the service provider edition. So if you're interested in hosting this, basically creating your own SaaS solution, effectively having a multi-tenant version of the software that you put on your own infrastructure, then talk to us and your distributors about that. We can do a separate webinar on that. And also we have we've recently put together a marketing content playbook. So if you can't keep up with all our emails and content coming at you left, right, and center, we've got one PDF which summarizes the latest blog articles, social graphics you can use for your sites if you want to just get some stuff out there if you've got time. I'm saying all of this acknowledging the fact that you've got a lot on at the moment, so it's just if this makes sense for you and your business right now, then you can, there's materials there, and use us as well. So as account managers, we're here, as are the distributor teams. If you need any sort of live presentations or anything, we're more than happy to jump on this at the moment. Obviously we were all gearing up for live events and things in person, so now we're not twiddling our thumbs, but we're available for webinars, and the focus is on video stuff if you want some assistance there. So feel free to come to us and ask for that kind of thing. Yeah, logos, Hiron. Logos. What more can you ask for? Excellent. All right. Welcome, Gavin. You joined just in time to see it all end. There will be a recording, by the way. So if you specified that you'd like us to follow up, then we will do and send you a copy to that. Okay, Chris, you got another question? Can you clarify, you mentioned emails are not journaled if the destination is unavailable and they're sent to a separate mailbox elsewhere. Neil, I'm going to hand that one over to you. Do you mind? Have you got that question from Chris? I know you were talking about it already, actually, on the chat there.
Yeah, exactly. I've not got the interface in front of me, but in the Exchange admin interface on Office 365, there's when you set up the journaling rule, you also define a bounce address, an address to send the journal message to if it's undeliverable. So that can be a separate mailbox in Office 365. Which would just collect these bounced emails, and then rather than just leaving them in Office 365, you can then configure MailStore with another job to just collect those messages and bring them into a location within the MailStore archive. So in the event that it's impossible to deliver that journal message directly to the gateway, it won't just vanish. It will still be collected. It's just not, in the ideal path. Well, it's as Chris has just pointed, is that the message itself? It's a bounce that contains the message as an attachment. So it's not ideal, but it does get a copy of that message unaltered as an attachment into the archive.
And they would also have been archived from another archiving job, as you said, from a multiple mailbox running. So they would be archived from the normal destination, but maybe not for the journal one. So.
Yes, indeed. Wow. So hopefully, if that message has got through to the mailbox as well, which in most cases it would do, you will have a copy in the archive. It's just you'll always have a guaranteed copy of that data as a bounced archive message.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's something that's easily missed, isn't it? It's sort of two layers of archiving. You've got the mailbox archiving as well as the journal, so it's not just journaling. Excellent. Okay. Well, listen, I think maybe we're moving close to the point we should wrap it up, really. We're planning on doing these every couple of weeks, ideally, if we can, on different topics. So while I've got you all here, maybe you could let us know if you think there's any particular things you'd like us to cover in more detail. It can be sales and marketing. It can be more sort of technical, deep dive stuff. Cheers, Mandy. Great to have you on it. Thanks a lot for taking some time out and joining us. If there's anything you'd like to know about, then we're happy just to do open sessions like this on a sort of regular basis. So, and you can always just email your ideas to partners@mailstore.com. But if there's anything you'd like to know, feel free to drop it in the chat. I will go back over the chat as well and make sure that if I missed anything, then I'll follow up and or via the distributors and stuff. We'll get the answers to you somehow. Okay, I think unless there's anything coming in, we'll call it a day there. Cheers, Roberto. Many thanks to you too. Listen, thanks a lot, Ronny, Neil. It's been great having you on. I think I'm going to use you two again to help me out.
Thank
you for having me here.
Brilliant.
You're welcome.
Excellent.
No problem.
Oh, here we go. Hiren's saying about performance tuning. So yeah, excellent. We'll we've got a blog article on that on the Zen Software site, so we can maybe look at reworking some of that and best practices, how to optimize your MailStore setup. Yeah, awesome. Okay, we'll leave it there, and I'll look forward to seeing hopefully some of you in a couple of weeks' time, and we'll send out some email promotion materials about that. Have a great day. Look after yourselves, and we'll see you soon. See you.
Cheers. Bye, guys.
Bye. Cheers.
Cheers.